Hey there, Around the Layout listeners. With advanced previews of upcoming episodes and monthly giveaways, now's the time to become an operating crew member. For just $3 a month, you'll get an exclusive membership sticker, your name listed on the operating crew roster, and automatic entry into our monthly giveaway drawings. Just as important, your financial support keeps all of our episodes from behind paywalls and free of those annoying car insurance commercials you hear on other podcasts. Joining the operating crew is quick and easy. Head to patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. And if you missed that, you'll find a link on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And thank you for being a listener. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. On this special episode of Around the Layout, we're going to be talking about the St. Louis RPM. And here to help me talk about that is Scott Thornton. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ray.
Good to see you once again, Scott. It's been a little while since you've been on the show, so good to see you, and we're going to be talking about an event that you reached out to me. You're really excited about this one, so really happy to talk about the St. Louis RPM that's coming up.
I'm always excited about the St. Louis RPM. It's my all-time favorite RPM, actually my all-time favorite model railroading event of the year, so I always look forward to it. End of July can't come quick enough for me, and so I took the opportunity after throwing this idea out to, I'm speaking to the audience here, to you, Ray, of inviting a friend and one of the organizers, Lonnie Bathurst. Lonnie's been involved with the St. Louis RPM for many, many years. He's a very nice man and a good modeler and a good guy to talk to. So I thought he'd be a perfect fit to come on your show and talk about all things St. Louis RPM.
That sounds like a great idea. Lonnie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ray. It's great to be here. Scott, thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah, you're welcome, Lonnie. It's going to be fun talking about the RPM.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. So, Ray, why don't you start and ask whatever you want, and we'll go from there.
Well, that's good. And I'm really excited to hear about this. I know I've heard a lot of people talk about the St. Louis RPM. And of course, the first thing I do after Scott had reached out is I go to your website. Your website's fantastic. Lots of resources there. So stlrpm.com. A lot of information there. Got me excited about it to a point where I was looking at airline tickets. We'll leave it as a mystery if Ray will be there or not. But
you should make it happen, Ray.
I should make it happen for sure.
Drop some cash.
But it's again an RPM I've heard a lot about. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the St. Louis RPM. If you want to tell us a bit about that, Lonnie.
Okay, that's a good place to start. So first, let me back up, and I think most of your viewers are of course active in the hobby and understand model railroading and prototype model railroading, but some of them may not be familiar with railroad prototype modelers per se. My understanding, and this is partially from going to the website, the National RPM website, and reading the history, but also partly from being sort of there. I wasn't there in the earliest of days in the late 80s when a few guys decided the hobby had been one of craftsman kits that focused on the transition era, if not the steam era, and said little for the diesel era. So the modelers in the late 80s decided they would be a part of the NMRA and take diesel models, which I think were largely Athearn blue boxes with all the great detail parts at the time, which was an industry budding in and of itself, and they would go to the nationals and have a display area, and you'd see hundreds of diesels, as much as anything, that were highly detailed from what was available at the time. And then from that, I think Naperville was the place that started with the idea of let's have lots of clinics. Let's go back a little bit and talk about resin kits and kits that had a lot of parts of models that weren't commercially available at the retail level, like the Athearn Blue Box and some of the other ready-to-runs. And Naperville became a place where you'd go and find the latest just off-the-shelf kits that took a lot of hours to build. And from Naperville, John Golden, which I think many people watching tonight would know, decided to start the St. Louis RPM, which was actually in O'Fallon, Illinois, across the river from St. Louis, Missouri. And it was in a little white church, had been a church, in the community park as a sort of a rec center, a public place where you could rent that hall. And John decided to try it out and invite people he knew that made parts and so forth. I think that first year, I happened to be there through Dan Kohlberg, who was a mutual friend of John and I. And Dan says, "You've got to go to this." He had been to Naperville and liked that, and John was starting off. So my first involvement in this was to unload a trailer on a hot day with all these 8-foot, those old folding tables that were 3/4-inch thick particle board or plywood. We were soaking wet, sweating, just trying to get these tables out. And I think at the end of the day, John, probably including his wife and maybe 2 kids at the time, totaled about 90 attendees. And that was the start. So then I exited and showed up a couple years later in what is actually Collinsville, Illinois, which we call the St. Louis RPM. And we rented one room in the Gateway Center. And this was John's doing again with a couple other St. Louisans. And eventually Dan got involved. And then I came along and said, I think I have some ideas that can make this bigger and better and attract more people. John listened, and we grew it from there. Not sure if that was your question, but that's how I started.
No, that's a great for, kind of humble beginnings for the show. Very small, but grew fast. And, sounds like your involvement started in the physical labor way with moving those chairs, but now helping head this up and providing ideas. So 16th annual, great history of the show, built as it builds. And tell us a little bit. You mentioned it's in Collinsville, Illinois, you said now, right? They call it the St. Louis RPM, but it's just across the river in Illinois.
Yep, it's on Interstate 55, mile marker 11. So you can go out and from the right angle, you can see the St. Louis Arch, because that's something 632 feet or whatever it is above ground, and it's there. So it's Metro East. A lot of St. Louisans think of the Illinois side as Metro East. And so Collinsville is a great spot on an interstate. At least 2 interstates come together near there, 3 if you include 64, and actually 4, 255, 55, 64, 70. They're all in that immediate area. The nice thing is, despite the fact that you can get there from so many ways, it's a little more rural than a big city like St. Louis. So hotels aren't expensive. Restaurants, bars, all those things aren't expensive. Crime is minimal. And it's a great place to have a great big event in a not-so-urban venue.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to be just outside of St. Louis, but yet be able to fly into, say, a major hub like St. Louis and then just make a short trek across to Illinois. And then, like you said, in a hub of a whole bunch of highways, which makes it a lot easier to get to. Tell us a little bit about the Gateway Center and the facility that you're holding the event.
We've lucked out in John's initial research to look around O'Fallon, where it started, and the surrounding communities. For whatever reason, the leaders at the time in that area decided to put a convention center that was smaller than the typical center in St. Louis, where you'd have professional sporting events and national shows for boating or tractors or whatever you do at a big level, and instead have a facility that would have, I think all in, there's probably maybe 50,000 or so square feet. We use 38,000 feet of it. And so it's a nice medium-sized convention center, not too small to be not have all the facilities and amenities that you want, but not so large that you have such a huge place that it's only for the biggest national events. So it's a perfect size, and it has, within walking distance, probably a half a dozen hotels, and I mean literally walking distance, and then a few more that you might drive to the next stoplight or something. So it's perfect for that, plus a few restaurants. And it's, again, in a somewhat rural area where there's no crime.
That's definitely a good thing. And then 38,000 square feet. You guys got a lot going on in that 38,000 square feet. We'll get to that in a second. I want to ask Scott, tell us a little bit about your history with the St. Louis RPM.
Well, I can't recall how long I've been attending the St. Louis RPM. It's been, it must be 7 or 8 years now, I think. But I started attending with Iowa Scaled Engineering, started to develop the proto throttle. And my partners in that adventure, Michael Peterson and Nathan Holmes, had attended the RPM in years past. And it was an event that they spoke highly of. And so as we were developing the throttle, I came one year to help promote the prototype that we put together and just kind of query modelers, see if there'd be any interest in the throttle. And then when I experienced it, I thought that was the first time I'd ever been to an RPM. And it was a totally different format than what I was accustomed to, in typical model gatherings. So that was really nice. There was a lot of high quality modeling that was on display, a huge variety of vendors, and the clinics were designed more for the prototypical modeler. I mean, there's a variety of clinics, so everybody gets something that they're looking for, I think. But I was interested in prototype modeling at that time, and still am. And so it just really whet my appetite. I thought this is a really, really neat event. And I got hooked, and I've gone every year since. And I try never to miss that particular RPM because it is the biggest, and it garners a lot of different modelers. A lot of guys come in from around the country. I've made many new friends from those different areas around the country, and it's just a really neat thing. I mean, it's as you both know, this hobby is all encompassing, and we're passionate about it. And when you gather at an event like an RPM, it just makes everybody really, really happy.
Oh, for sure. Especially after the last few years we've had, we're very happy to get back together and see each other and be able to have that in-person camaraderie, because there's nothing tops it. So while I'm talking to you, Scott, and had you noticing the theme for the 2023 St. Louis RPM, and I think you may have had a play in this theme, because I remember you talking about this. Either you had a play in it, or maybe you kind of helped inspire it, because when we interviewed you, you were talking about the idea of a stage and theater as part of your layout. And that's the theme this year. Why don't you maybe, Lonnie, tell us a bit about that theme? And was Scott Thornton on your mind when they came up with that?
Oh, very much an integral part. We live in an era that, as people hone their skills, and there's so many types of skill sets that come into this hobby to make it great, that these products that Scott's are involved with, you're bringing sound and things into the layout, into the environment. You truly are setting the stage for a theater. And a couple of the things that I wanted to do, I guess, first of all, about a year ago, the NMRA had a regional meet in Indianapolis, and it combined the RPM and the, I think, maybe 3 regions, divisions of that area. They had a great meet, and I noticed that some of the presenters, like all of us, they're not getting any younger. And these guys were famous in magazine publications for years, and as the digital media came on, They've been instrumental in that. They've developed fantastic layouts and have been just leaders in every way, cutting edge technology, how we build today and what we run and how we operate. They're all there, but they're getting older. And so I thought, for all these themes that I've come up with in recent years, that it was time to do one on the layout. And to take it past that with Scott and their new product, it's really a stage, it's a theater. And so I took it to that level of, a weekend at the theater, and I wanted to cover in this year's theme all of the various topics that make a layout far more than the old sheet of plywood and even what it's become today. And Scott, when I called him and I said, you guys are doing great things, not only in the sound they're bringing to it, but Scott, with the technology he used to build that bridge and the scene it created. So, Scott, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the theater aspect of putting a layout together is something that's really important to me, and that's one of the things that I covered in a clinic that I presented last year at the RPM. And to know that the theme this year is along those lines is just very exciting. And what Lonnie was alluding to is Iowa Scaled Engineering is going to be unveiling what we feel is a paradigm shifting product at the St. Louis RPM. This is the premiere. It's called the Squealer, and what it is it's a flange squeal. It's a motion detected flange squeal system, true motion detection, micro motion detection. Now, most people are familiar with motion detectors, but at a scale level, they're just not there. This motion detector that Iowa Scale has developed is similar to motion detectors that you might see in a computer mouse. And so they've been able to put that into production, and the Squealer is going to be a system that not only has pre-recorded professional sounds that have been recorded and edited, actually Scale sound systems, for those who are familiar with their speakers systems, are the ones that put this together. So it comes with integrated flange squeal sounds, prototype sounds, but it also has the ability through a micro SD card for modelers to upload and play their own sounds. So really it's quite a significant boost to the hobby, I think, because it brings trackside sound, true trackside sound to the layouts.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, again, plays along with that idea that you expressed back in the podcast, like we mentioned, and, now with the RPM falling on that same theme of just the effects that you can put within a layout and bring that realism even more forward. The ISE is definitely on the cutting edge of that for sure. So that'll definitely be a great product to see, and definitely interested in, you're putting on a clinic as well at the end of this. I hope you knew about that one. It's not a surprise one for you, but you're actually putting on a clinic called Digital Theater, how electronics can enhance your layout performance. So tell us a little bit about what one could expect when they go to your clinic there, Scott.
Yeah, I'm going to be the presenter, but Michael and Nathan, the partners at Iowa Scale, they'll also be participating, and it's an opportunity for the three of us to present all the variety that Iowa Scale brings to the hobby in terms of electronics, but electronics that really amplify and enhance your operations. So everything from the proto throttle to the flange squeal system to a variety of other products that they currently offer and ones that are on the docket for future release. So we're going to be talking about how to integrate those products into your layout to make your operations more realistic, more fun, and as well as have a Q&A time so that modelers have an opportunity to ask the three of us, or actually primarily Michael and Nathan, specific questions about the electronics or about things that they'd like to see in the hobby. So it'll be a really fun time just to talk about how electronics can be integrated in many different facets.
Sounds like a great opportunity to have, like you said, that access to Michael and Nathan and yourself to share ideas and ask those questions and, get the knowledge they need to add that kind of realism to their layout. One of on a quick count, I believe 18 different clinics that are available at the St. Louis RPM. Does that sound about right, Lonnie?
I think we have 21, including the keynote speaker, running both days, all day long from 9:30 till 4:30, 2 at a time. We only have 2 rooms in that facility that are really suitable for that sort of thing. So we run, 2 of them at a time. Some of the other nice RPMs run 4 at a time and focus more on clinics than models or any of the other events. But we run 2. So we have about 21 total, I think.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. Let's talk about that keynote speaker because it's a familiar name to most everybody who will be listening to the podcast. You've got the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman, Otto Vondrak. Tell us about that.
Well, I called him, and I knew that he had written an interesting piece on the Virginia and Ohio and worked with others before that had done that before him, Alan McClellan's layout. And I asked him if he would speak as our keynote speaker and focus on what he knew about his study of the history of that layout and its impact on today's layout design, the operation, this whole idea of the layout being a theater. And to me, just as I had said earlier, going to some of these previous recent meets to see these gentlemen who developed some of the best layouts in the country are getting old. And before long, they won't be able to travel to be involved in the clinics and the presentations, whether it's the NMRA or the RPM or whatever.
Right.
I wanted to focus on the layout this year as opposed to a dozen other themes I'd like to get to in the coming years. But I found that some of these folks at this point, because their spouses aren't healthy or they're not healthy, they just weren't able to travel anymore. So the people you'd watch 5 and 10 and 25, 35 years ago weren't available. So when I called Otto and asked him to do this, he's really speaking about a layout that used to exist and a gentleman that was such an instrumental person in the development of this, the idea that the layout, in my words, not necessarily his, it's a theater. It's a presentation of everything from Scott's idea of the sound. Lance Mindeheim does a wonderful job of creating scenes in the diorama that are so real with the sunlight, you don't know if you're looking at a real locomotive or a setting or a model. And then you look at on video, Joe Atkinson with his Iowa Interstate. When you look at those videos, that's about as real gets. And to me, that's all part of it. Other things involve operation, but to the point where we brought in Otto and asked him to speak about what I think is maybe the leading layout of our time that was created, 30, 40 years ago? And the ideas that he came around with, the walk-around idea and the linear projection and using handheld throttles and scenery that's not that deep and, multiple layers, if you will. Things that we take for granted today is something we want to aspire to have on our own layout.
Well, that's definitely for sure, Lonnie, about Alan McClellan's layout and just how much impact that he's had. And you probably couldn't have found a better person than Otto Vondrak to come there and talk about it.
Oh, I think he's great. He's a gentleman to talk to. I know he has a lot of energy and creativity. He's a great thing for the magazine. And I think his understanding through the research he did on that article that he wrote, the cover story in RMC several months ago, he has a good feel for what took place over time in the development of that model railroad and the leading things that that Alan McClellan did whether it was scenery techniques at the time, or the shelf layout concept, or the walk around, or the use of handheld throttles, the idea that you develop a theme around that railroad to make it so real from the operational aspects of that railroad. They were a business. And so it ran from one point to the other. It was there to make profit, just like the real railroads. In fact, it's been said many times, and Otto himself said this, that railroad seemed so real that a lot of times readers, reading various articles in different publications over the years, thought it was a real railroad, a prototype railroad. He did that good of a job in creating a layout. He took us to the theater, is what he did.
He did, for sure. And I'll tell you, I think Alan McClellan would be honored to have a guy like Otto von Drack talking about his layout as well. You're talking about a guy who's a phenomenal historian, a great representative of our hobby, and editor of what I believe is the best magazine going out there right now, RMC. So that's going to be a really interesting time to spend with Otto von Drack, hearing about the V&O and amongst all the other things that are going on there. Like you said, 21 clinics. And then in between all these clinics and all this learning, you've got 5,000 plus models being displayed. Talk a little bit about what one might expect to see within that 5,000 models.
Well, that's always been the focus of this particular RPM. They all have models. I think it's a big part of all of them. We've tried to keep that our theme so that we don't lose track of the course we're on, to be for prototype modelers. Even though it's the largest, whatever you want to say, group of exhibitors, from manufacturers to mall and paw operations to historical societies, all of that. But the idea of the models was, let's hold on to that and never lose track of the fact this is about the models. And it grew and it grew and it grew. So currently we'll have 100 tables for modelers. And if it's okay, I'd talk about the early entry program now. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do it. That'd be a good idea.
So a few years ago, when John was still involved, we both had this idea of how can we appeal to more modelers and give them something special and yet help us as well. So different names were kicked around, and finally we stuck with the idea of early entry. And with that, we allow those modelers who maybe they have dioramas or a large number of models or big heavy things to carry in, rather than have them stand out at the front door with all that, why not bring them into the back doors to the various loading docks that the Gateway Center has available? Mm-hmm. So the best case scenario was we gave them their own dock and said, please don't show up before 8 a.m., and between 8 and 9, we'll get you in the door, give you time to set up before the crowds come in, stay out of the way of the exhibitors. And Jeff Kubler came up with the idea of giving them an early entry ID badge, which has a green dot on it. And you get that when you walk in the door. And after you've set up, we ask you to go to the front to the registration to pay your admission fee before we allow the regular attendees to come in. And so that's been a hit for them and gives them time to have some sanity and get all set up. And it's, I think, an encouragement to bring more models. The models, to your point, they're every scale, every gauge, every era. We encouraged years ago to bring structures and even dioramas, and didn't want it to be just about freight cars per se. Mm-hmm. So we get everything. Some say that we probably appeal to the more, I wouldn't say necessarily modern modeler, but we've drifted away from the pre-World War II, maybe even post-World War era of that 40-foot boxcar to having a lot of stuff from the fallen flags. And that could be a generational thing. As modelers, as the average age becomes younger, they like what they see on the tracks. And if the average age is 55 or 60, they remember the fallen flags.
Right.
And maybe Dad didn't take them down to the depot to see the steam trains when the passenger trains came to town. They saw something newer. But there's all kinds of models in all stages of completion. It's wonderful just to walk around and look at those things.
When I think of an RPM, one of the things I think of, especially a local one, like we have one up here, the Northeast RPM, and then obviously there's RPMs all over. I guess I get this idea in my mind. I'm going to go there and I'm going to see a lot of local flavor, and for the most part, you do. You see the kind of the railroads of that that area kind of thing. Like New England, I go up there, the Northeast one, I go to see. Hopefully somebody's got one painted in Housatonic Railroad or New England Central or Providence and Worcester. But what kind of variety do you see within the models that are being displayed at the St. Louis RPM?
It truly is everything, because we cater to historical societies as well and get about 20 of those. So while that isn't every society out there, it's from all over this country. So you get them from the Northeast, the Southeast, all across the West and the Midwest. And although I, like to look at the Midwestern railroads from the Illinois Central to whatever else ran around here, you see a lot of early stuff on the East Coast, Pennsy and New York Central. Their societies are there. You see the West Coast stuff, UP and others. So I don't know that anything is missing. It's amazing how many people come from a long way away. We rent a lot of hotel rooms for travelers that come that far to bring their stuff.
What do you think in 16 years of doing this has made the St. Louis RPM like the biggest and the most appealing? What do you credit that to? What do you think is the big piece that you're doing right that attracts people from all over?
I think it's different than the others in that when I came on board with John and then Dan at the time, Dan Kohlberg, they allowed me to express my opinion and grow it in a different direction than maybe some of the others. And what I said was, in my last life, I used to travel for a living. Mm-hmm. And you stay in cities and you stay in hotels and you seek out places that you can enjoy yourself, where there's restaurants and safe and clean and nice hotels and other things to do. And for things that you like specifically, whether you're a fisherman, you go to, some kind of convention or trade show where they have bass boats or whatever, you want to go where there's other people like you. So to me, this needed to be as much of a place where someone would say, as an old economist, I would say, where am I going to cast my dollar vote? Where am I going to spend the few days a year I get to do what I want to do? And I'm taking money away from the family or whatever I'm doing. And why would I go there? Well, I want to go there because I have fun. And I talk to other people like me. And, there's not as many of us as there are bowlers and golfers and duck hunters and other things. So we have to go places where those few people gather. And I want it to be comfortable, fun, entertaining before and after hours. When you're there, I want you to have an opportunity to do all kinds of different things, from talk to people, to go to clinics, to look at models. And one thing that I think is true in this hobby is model railroaders like to spend money and buy trains. So I thought if you can come up with a good combination of exhibitors that had stuff for sale, and if you get the better exhibitors there, limit the number of hobby shops, bring the manufacturers, have all the historical societies and research that is available, they'll come to your event and mull around on the trade show floor and meet the cutting edge people, as well as go to clinics and as well as look at models. So I think there's a lot of things that you put together. And then we're all professionals. We all have a way we earn a living. And if you go to trade events in your industry, in your specialty, you find that you learn more just talking to people between the classrooms and outside of the other events, where you can stand there and just be yourself and everybody shares what they know. So I wanted to help create an event where there was plenty of time to just hang out with other people that liked what you like, and you could ask them questions and learn from them. It's not always in a clinic, although I think clinics are great. I always go to them when I'm at some other RPM. I think it's that whole environment you put together. So that's a long answer to your question, but it's there's a lot of pieces in that puzzle.
I also think it it helps that St. Louis is centrally located in the country, so a lot of modelers can travel. They don't have to travel clear across the country to get to a specific RPM. They can go, half the distance. So I think that helps.
You've got to come from Iowa down to this. What keeps you coming back year after year?
It's everything that Lonnie just outlined, Ray. It's the camaraderie, there's something about this hobby when we're all kindred spirits. We all have a passion for either prototype railroading, model railroading, or both. And when we're around other people that are like-minded, that have that same passion, there's just this connection that you don't get anywhere else. And it's my happy place. I want to be around those kind of people, and I enjoy it. And we all suffer from the same disease, the same passion, so it's just a joy to gather. And now that we're past the whole pandemic thing, it's just so much fun to get together, have the BS, back and forth, as well as the hardcore, modeling information and everything in between. And it's just fun. And like Lonnie said, that's what he was trying to develop, and that's what he and his team have developed. And it's just a really good time.
Yeah, it surely sounds like it. You got so much going on, and I'm sure you're going to be bringing yourself a few bucks to spend. 200 vendor tables, and not just small. We're talking about some of the big players in model railroading. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, Lonnie?
Yeah, in that mix of our business model was or is that you use this convention center and have a lot of hotel choices located, as Scott pointed out, in the central part of the country at a time of year that people are normally accustomed to getting away for a few days. Weather's always good. Might be too hot, but you're not going to be in a snowstorm. And we try to keep out of the way of the NMRA National and the N-Scalers and the others. Sometimes we get in the way of a regional or whatever, but it's set up to appeal to people that time. And then when you start talking about vendors and exhibitors, same thing. They have personal lives. They have other schedules, which they need to go to other events that help them promote their business and show their wares where they make their money. So we try to fit in the middle of all that. To us, starting with John in conversations he and I and Dan had years ago, I think there's some kind of good chemistry in having the biggest of the big, well-known manufacturers that people will drive 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours just to walk up and shake their hand and ask them questions and see what's on their table that's new, that hasn't been out there yet. Sometimes it's a brand new car in a box they can buy that nobody knew was going to be there. And to have some of those, or basically a lot of the big ones, if not all, and then to have someone who's just starting and they're in their basement making stuff by hand, and at $35 a table and $35 for 2 days, they come out and show the world what they have. And that's like finding a new place that has great cookies for sale, warm out of the oven, when these guys come with their new table of things. And then you've got innovators, Scott's company, my gosh, every year they're there, they have something new to talk about, it seems like, and it's cool stuff. And so, yes, we love clinics, we love models and all that, but that part where all of these exhibitors are there showing what they have, I think that's a big drawing card and part of the chemistry.
Yeah, just looking at your list here, you've got some really great manufacturers coming with scale trains and Tangent, and Rapido will be there amongst many others. Then you have a lot of these, like Iowa Scaled Engineering, which we talked about, will be there, right down to Scotty's model shop himself.
Sure.
Scott Thornton also putting a table up too. So it'll be great. And then you've got that wacky Canadian who likes to take people and shrink them. You got him coming to there too with mini prints.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So that'll
Bernard
be a
Helen.
great opportunity as well for folks to check out what Bernard Helen is up to with mini prints and his ability to do 3D scanning and make you a mini me of on your own layout.
Yeah.
So very cool things
Yeah.
that are going to be happening there with vendors. And again with mini prints, and then that access of being able to walk up to these manufacturers, guys like Scale Trains, who just love to hear and go out and talk to people. We just had them on the Shane Wilson on the podcast talking about his road trip and going out and meeting people and shaking hands. And for as much as you like to go up to those types of vendors and talk to them, they love talking to you too and hearing your ideas and hearing how you're putting their models to work and the weathering that is being done, the additional detailing that's being done is just really neat to have that opportunity to share it back with a manufacturer.
Yeah. And Ray, I'll also mention, and Lonnie can expand on this, that in years past, and I would presume they're having it this year again, is the learning stations. Is that true, Lonnie?
Yeah, that was something that I've been affiliated with a national organization as a financial planner and wealth manager. And so I go to their national conferences, and they started this thing. If you're willing to get up very early, you could go to these learning stations and maybe learn some new software program or some new law in the tax code or whatever it might be. And I thought, why don't we do that? So a few years ago, we started inviting people, and Scott's been involved with that, with the Proto Throttle and others, to where if they have a product or a skill set, could be weathering, could be soldering, painting, the electronics that his firm represents, whatever it might be, we have made banners to put by their tables, their booths, to say, come over here and see this. We usually have 4 to 6 of them a year. That have some special way you can go up and sit down with them one-on-one and learn something about how to do something. And I think people like that. It's a little addition.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Oh, I was just going to say there's some really talented modelers that are at these learning stations. And, they've had the weathering shop guys there before. They're going to have them again this year. Where can you go and sit down with some of these guys who are truly masters of their craft, and they're more than willing to show you any technique that you so desire? I mean, that's incredible value as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, just really awesome access to some really great people. Jeff Otto talking about how to build turnouts. No better guy to talk about building your own turnouts than Jeff Otto. And you've got access right from Soundtracks themselves, talking about Blue Nami and backdrop creation, introduction to JMRI by Brian Post. Just really fantastic opportunities to learn a whole bunch when you're out there in St. Louis.
And if I could also say, too, just backing up a little bit, talk about the models again. There are so many models and such variety to take in. I try and take it all in, but it's really overwhelming. And it's funny because after I've gotten home from the show, in about a 2-week time, modelers will post photos of the models from the show online. And I'm always amazed, Ray, how I go back and I look at those photos and I see things that I completely missed when I was perusing the tables, and things that I thought, was that model even there? That thing is awesome, and I completely missed it because I was overwhelmed by everything that was there to look at. So there truly is something for everyone, and it goes into great depth of detail, and you can. It's just, I don't even know how to describe it. Everything's there.
I'll tell you what, with over 5,000 models, 200 plus vendor tables, 20 plus historical societies in attendance, if you find yourself bored in the 2 days, you've done something terribly wrong. There is just seemingly so much to do there, and it's no wonder why you didn't catch them all. Over 5,000 of them. It's hard to absorb them all, but great that you have that much variety at that show to make sure that you see a whole bunch of different things, and that makes it very unique.
And don't forget the layouts, and they have incredible layouts that come to the show. for display and that are operating. And one more thing to take in, the modeling's amazing.
And then you do some layout tours on that Friday night. Is that also happening, Lonnie?
Yeah, we have two types of layouts. The one is, as Scott alluded to, within the facility, within the main hall, we usually have one or two. And this year, Fremo is going to be there. And
Great.
Chris Thies is there with, I don't know how many pieces he had, but we've given him something like 30 by 70 feet to put this together, and it's nicely detailed. So that'll be fun. And then I honestly can't tell you off the top of my head the two home tours we have on Friday night, but the way our team has voted over the years for security reasons, we don't publish that in advance, but once you're in there and you're a paid attendee, then we assume you're an honest person, and we give you a map and a name and all of that to go to layout tours. There's two of them on Friday evening. And they've always been first-class operations. Like so many cities in the U.S., cities are central hubs for usually 10, 15, 25 outstanding layouts, and St. Louis is no exception. You know, the magazines have been filled, and the electronic magazines have been filled for years with these fabulous layouts from the Gateway area. And so one year we picked the Illinois side and feature two of them out of a dozen or more that are there. And then we cross the river the next year to some central location where you can go see a couple more. So we have two on the Illinois side this year for Friday night.
The other thing too is Ray, we want to cover, they have a door prize end of the show. That is the giveaway is incredible. It's like nothing I've ever experienced. I think that one time you had 400 or 500 things. I can't.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
We ask everybody who exhibits, whether you're a historical society, a mom and pop operation, or the biggest of the big, to please donate something. And what you donate is your choice. Someone might send a nice diesel locomotive with sound and all of that and not even exhibit that year, or they might give an annual membership to their historical society. Whatever it is, all of them donate something. So we tell the visitors that are there at the time of that, which usually starts around 4:30 or so on Saturday afternoon, that basically every exhibitor in the hallway has given something. And that's a pretty honest statement. And so this goes on, to Scott's point, for maybe an hour, where they have a number, and that's how we keep track of our attendance that year. When you come in the door, you get a ticket, and we take half of it, you keep the other half, and then we draw numbers, and there's hundreds of these prizes. It takes a while to do it, but a lot of people stick around for that because there's something on the table they want, and it's fun. It's good for the exhibitors because everybody stays.
Yeah, I bet that'd be definitely reason. I mean, you've got plenty of reasons to go to the St. Louis RPM, and now on top of this, a chance to win, some of these fabulous prizes that you've been able to put together through all the generosity of your vendors. Boy, I think I'm going to have to end the show here and go book an airline ticket and get myself out to the St. Louis RPM.
Good idea.
Maybe Scott will pick me up at the airport. So I want to thank both of you guys for coming on and telling us about the St. Louis RPM. It's a really well-known and really exciting event that you're having out there. Let's go over the details for people that are listening and would want to do as I'm going to be looking to do and get an airline ticket booked to fly out there and spend some time with you guys at the RPM.
Okay, you want the details and when and where? Is that what you're saying? Okay,
yep, that's what I'm saying.
So it's a lot of people, hundreds, come on Thursday evening, which would be the 27th, and they get into their hotels and they go to a barbecue at a local barbecue place, or they go to the DoubleTree that evening for socializing afterwards. It runs all day Friday from 9 a.m. till about 9 p.m., and there's a social event at the DoubleTree afterwards, so you can go there after the keynote speaker. All day Saturday from 9 a.m. till about 5 when the door prizes take over. You can go to our website. There's probably 8 or more hotels in the area that have offered block room rates to guarantee the rooms and the rates. And that's even in a year when the Cubs are in town, which have taken so many hotel rooms from, the Gateway area. One other thing that we didn't talk much about that I'd love to talk about is we all love to have something new at these events, and every year somebody brings a new car, new locomotive or something and surprises people and have it for sale or on display as a prototype that they're developing. But this year I think we have 4 authors with new books that'll be there. And since prototype modeling is about research, we have all these societies there and photo dealers and so forth. This year I believe we have 4 different people that are bringing their just off the press book on different railroads. Mike Schaefer just called the other day, and he's coming with a new book on Chicago Northwestern under Schaefer Station, which is his new publishing company. So, and there's other guys there too that are bringing new books. So that's kind of exciting. It's all there.
Yeah, you're covering the entire gamut of model railroading from books to new products and vendors to clinics to just so much there. So again, the St. Louis RPM, July 28th and 29th. That's a Friday and Saturday. We're out at the Gateway Convention Center in Collinsville, Illinois. For more information, check out their website. It's stlrpm.com. And we'll put all the links to this in the show notes so that you can get right there. Great job with the website. Great job organizing it. Everything is right there on the website, including hotel information, travel information, all there so that you'll know exactly what to do to get out there to the St. Louis RPM. So again, Lonnie, Scott, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Scott, Ray, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.